think those of us who participated in this past know to get to that level, you're pretty special students. This scholarship program is an academic competition for recognition and scholarships that began in 1955. High school students enter the National Merit Program by taking the preliminary SAT and the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, and by meeting published entry and participation requirements. So with that, if we could have Ellie and Allison come forward, and if I'm going to ask all the board members to just go across the front, please.
It's pronounced L, by the way.
Al?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Al.
Sorry.
Al.
Oh, and it's
Is it misspelled?
yes.
Well, we'll get a new one, right?
We'll get a new one.
We'll get a
Thank
new
you.
one. But we take this to the photo ops.
Okay.
Congratulations on behalf of the board.
Thank you.
And Allison, congratulations on behalf of the board of DeKalb.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Congratulations. We'd like to have you go across here. And everyone, please join me in recognizing Congratulations.
Oh, yeah?
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. We'll get that.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to have the board stay here because we're going to recognize some additional students. We're recognizing DeKalb students in the DCP SAVE program. This has been in our community for many, many years. It's been an excellent program, and we're actually going to have a couple of our students talk about it. But the Board of Education will recognize the following DCP SAVE high school students. Amanda Hedberg, our co-president. Sammy Coakley, the other co-president. Abby Kuzmic, is that correct? Close. Angelica Garcia. Courtney Donnelly. Kristen Johnson. Ashley Lorenz. And Kelsey Grubbs. Please join me in welcoming them to the front. We're going to hand you your certificates, and at that time I'm going to introduce their sponsor, instructor, Mr. Waymeyer, and he will introduce a couple of our speakers. Amanda? Congratulations. And we'll just have you go down and shake everyone's hand. Congratulations. Abby?
She isn't here.
Abby's not here. Okay. Angelica. Angelica, congratulations on behalf of the board. Great job. Courtney?
She isn't here.
Courtney? That's okay. Kristen Johnson. Kristen, congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education. Ashley Lorenz. Ashley, congratulations on behalf of the board. Samantha Coakley. Samantha, congratulations on behalf of the board. And Kelsey Grubbs. Congratulations on behalf of the board. Okay, board members, let's sit down, and then I'm going to let Mr. Waymeyer take over here.
Well, first of all, Mr. Lord's daughter is also in the group, Madison. She's not here tonight because she had, I think, an engagement or something. Volleyball, so that was important, so she couldn't be here tonight either. Well, first of all, I'm Dennis Waymeyer. I'm one of the school counselors at the high school. And about 3 years ago, when I first started at DeKalb, Dr. Moeller came to me and said, you know, you were working with Boys and Girls Clubs for all those years. I think you'd be good at working with this group. I had no idea what the group was going to be about, what we were going to do, but it has been an awesome thing for me to be a part of because I get to work with some of these awesome students who are really doing a good thing in our community, and that's helping our students understand about the risk of doing risky behavior like drugs and alcohol. safe driving, texting and driving, things like that. But this particular group this year is challenging me to do even more. And so I am really excited that they're being acknowledged tonight. And so I'm going to let the co-presidents kind of talk about what they're wanting to do this year, because they have some really lofty ideas. And I know that that Tamara has been really excited about what they're going to do. They've met with her, and we're not going to have any excuses. They're going to get what they need to get done this year and do what's best for our high school students and help them make really good choices this year. So if I could just have Sammy and Amanda, the rest of you, if you want to go ahead and sit down, you can do that. And they're going to talk about those things real quick that we're going to be doing this year.
Well, I'm Sammy. I'm one of our co-presidents, and I'm first just going to talk a little about what DCP SAFE is. It stands for DeKalb County Partnership for a Safe and Active Family Environment. And our mission is to improve the environment of our school and our community by encouraging healthy choices and lifestyles. Like you said, some of our main focus has been on underage drinking, texting and driving, and the use of tobacco. And this year we're actually also going to do a lot with this drug hookah and make sure that people know like what it is, because a lot of high schoolers are using this drug often, and I don't think that they realize what they're putting into their bodies, so we're going to make sure that they do.
Some of our major plans, our first one is the week of October 23rd to 31st. That's our Red Ribbon Week, which discourages substance abuse. So throughout the week, we're going to be having students sign pledges to be drug-free. And to kind of end that on a high note, during that weekend of October 26th, we're going to have a drug-free movie night. And our next big plan is going to be in April, which we're going to make pinwheels for Child Abuse Awareness Month, because pinwheels are the symbol of child abuse. And then our biggest hope for this year is to do a prom demonstration, which they did in Sycamore last year, and it worked really well. We're going to attempt to stage a real drunk driving accident with some of our actual students to kind of show the dangers of drunk driving and the harsh realities of it. And then to wrap up the year, our last hope is, if this movie night goes well, to do one other movie night.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wainwright, thanks for your leadership on the program, for your students for volunteering your time to participate in this. Thank you again very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we move on to acceptance of gifts and donations, and it is with great pleasure that the Board of Education accepts with gratitude the donation of $10,000 from an anonymous donor to our district for students with special needs. Do we have a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Again, with our deepest gratitude. Thank you. Public comment. We do have one card. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and criticism of individuals is not in order. Carrie Malott. Carrie lives on Malta Road.
Thank
What's
you.
yours, Carrie?
I have a couple, 3 comments here. I'll try to make it quick. First of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Administration for the online backup material. I looked at it today for the first time in depth, and it's very, very helpful. I looked at the newspaper this morning and saw the article about the land swap, and there wasn't much in that article, but there was quite a bit in the backup material, so that's very helpful. I'll get to that again in a moment about the land swap, but before that, first on the agenda is the radios. That's an issue that's been something in my mind ever since the last election, before this board was configured as it is now. And I brought to the board's attention back then that I wasn't convinced that things were as they should be. That turns out to be the case, and I just want to remind the board that those Starcom radios are very expensive, the ones that turned out not to be needed. And I certainly hope you do your utmost to try and get money back on those radios. I see it was $40,000 or something to that effect for these new Moto turbos. Perhaps some of that money at least can be compensated by getting rid of those unnecessary expensive Starcom radios. So I know Tammy's been working on that. I look forward to seeing the outcome. Now to the land swap. I feel like I'm getting the cart in front of the horse here because Dr. Briscoe is going to present something about this tonight, and I don't want to speak out of turn. But with help from the backup materials, I'm concerned about a couple of things. I'd rather do this interactively, but I know this board's policy is to speak now and not later. So I'm concerned mostly about the loss in the value of the land down on Fairview. That was purchased for about $1.4 million, and it looks like from the backup material we're getting 600 some odd thousand for it. That's a huge loss. That leads me to wonder about the appraisals. This building was appraised for over $1 million, but there's questions about how much is it really worth. In any event, with respect to the land on Fairview, I'm not quite sure I can imagine a 50% loss in value, or more than 50%, even in this difficult recession. And because of the question in my mind about that, I just advised the board and asked that the board move slowly, cautiously on this. It may or may not be a good thing, I don't know. I'm waiting to hear the details. But I'm also concerned with, along with that possible loss in value to the district, further inequity across the schools. Swapping that land in Fairview for land next to the high school may or may not be a good thing. I'm not going to judge that until I hear everything. But certainly, it has potential to create further inequity when we have many, many schools that need all kinds of work and perhaps expansion, perhaps even some point in the future another school like Portland, a large 4-section school to the west end of the district. Again, I'm just wondering, whether or not that particular land swap is the best thing, and how that value can be distributed across the whole district. So those are just my concerns. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll move on to our non-business consent agenda. It's been recommended the Board of Education approve non-business consent agenda items A through F.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Wait,
Oh, excuse me?
for B on that item, the request for human resources, the personnel demographic report, it still wasn't in there unless I can't see.
It's on the
You see it on
agenda.
there?
It's on the agenda tonight.
It'll be
Connie's going to be talking about it towards the end.
new business D.
There's going to be a presentation.
Okay,
on
the
it.
demographic thing.
Okay.
Okay, I went to C, sorry.
No problem. Roll call, please.
Cohen Barnes,
Yes.
Nina Fontana,
Yes.
Michael Ward,
Yes.
Jessica Lyons,
Yes.
Tom Mattia,
Yes.
Mike Rubik,
Yes.
Tracy Williams.
Yes.
Okay, as you may recall, a meeting or two ago, Tammy came and talked about going out submitting bids for backup snow removal. She has done that, and there's been a motion brought forward in the material that the Board of Education award a contract for backup snow removal services to D. Ryan Tree Landscaping, LLC, 17271 Route 23, DeKalb, Illinois, for the 2012-13 winter season. Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Tammy, I do believe we had 2 bids. I saw in the material.
That's correct.
And this is clearly the lower one.
Absolutely.
And this is a gentleman that we've had as our backup person before.
He provided our backup services last year by contract. We didn't need to use the services throughout the last winter season, and with any luck, we may be able to continue this coming year without using them, but we do need to have it in place just in the event. The previous years, we did contract out some of the services, so he was our contractor. I believe it was for 2 to 3 years prior to that, and did an excellent job for us at that time.
Okay. Any other questions for him? Roll call, please.
Nina Fontana,
Yes.
Michael Ward,
Yes.
Jessica Lyons,
Yes.
Tom Mattia,
Yes.
Mike Rubik,
Yes.
Tracy Williams,
Yes.
Cohen Barnes.
Yes.
Tammy also gave us an update on this proposal at our last meeting, and an update of the process of how she was going to do this, I think back in our August meeting. The approval of a 2-way radio communication proposal. It's been recommended that the Board of Education approve the purchase of 102 Motorola XPR 3300 TRBO portable radios at a cost not to exceed $44,000 from Dixon Audio Communications Incorporated. In addition to the $44,000, administration recommends that the board approve $2,000 of contingency funds for the purchase of earpieces for security staff and administration. Tammy, do you want to talk a little bit about the process you went through and how you make this decision before we enter a motion.
Absolutely. We had a committee put together this year, consisting of Connie Roman, Brian Tobin, and myself, to interview several vendors in the area and out, I will say. And through process of elimination in regards to service they can provide, the radios that can be used within our own infrastructure, as well as the previous service we've actually received from Dixon Ottawa. The decision was made to recommend Dixon Ottawa Communications. As you may know, they were our previous provider when we bought the Moto Turbos last year. It has changed ownership. The previous owner did retire and sell out to Matt Beck, who is president from Dixon Ottawa, as well as two more individuals from the company. One is Kevin. Kevin has been actually our service tech for the entire process and has been extremely helpful and responsive to any of our requests from a service standpoint, and designed our current infrastructure that works very well with our digital and our analog radios and the programming that was needed. And so with the change of ownership and the most recent presentations, we are making a recommendation to continue with the Dixon Ottawa services and also the purchase of the additional radios. Connie and I had the opportunity to meet with every principal in the district to identify how many radios were actually needed in each building. We have been dealing with analog radios, the ICOMs, that have been working in conjunction with our 100 Moto Turbos that we have on hand for the past year. It's not an ideal situation. The communication is limited within buildings, and the ICOMs don't communicate back throughout the district. That, along with the FCC mandate that is in effect as of December 31st, the ICOM radios can no longer be used after December 31st, so we were forced to look to purchase digital radios to replace those analogs. In the reviews within each principal meeting, we were able to identify who critically needs them within the building. And in that same time, we also identified which positions were needed because of services that were offered through our support services team members. Because of students' needs, medically fragile students, behaviorally challenged students, some of those teachers have to have a radio on their hip at all times so they can have immediate communication back to the office. For that reason, out of the 102 that we're recommending purchasing, 26 of them are actually student services for student service reasons. And we've had conversations with Jessica Stewart, and I've identified that their budget is able to absorb the cost of those 26 radios, since that is the purpose of buying them, is for that department. This will give us approximately 7 extra radios to have on hand. As we know, once we roll them out, there's going to be somebody that was just missed in the process and is going to need a radio right away. So that's where the recommendation for the 102 is coming.
Tammy, could you explain, and I don't know the exact numbers, but from when this was presented to the board, and we said go back to the drawing board last spring, the price has come down significantly.
Yes, it has.
Can you explain why?
Absolutely. A year ago, we did not have the option to purchase the current radios that we are recommending today. The radios that we have on staff now, the Moto Turbos that we currently have a keyboard and a screen to the front, and the new radios that we're proposing are about half the cost. They don't have a screen. They don't have the keys on the front. But there really isn't a need for that. We've determined in the process of, because the radios we're purchasing will be used by staff that are really only working within the building they're at. They're not maintenance staff or administration that are floating between buildings and may have to switch channels frequently. They will go to a channel and they're going to stay on that channel pretty much indefinitely. But they would have the option to be able to switch channels should the need arise, or we need to transfer a radio to another building. That gives us that flexibility to do that, but still gives us the reduced cost of almost $400 of each radio to go with this lower end model. They're still Motorola's. They are still 16-channel units, just like the current systems we have. And I will say in the current radios that we use, we don't use the keyboard. The screen is nice for a person like me who switches between channels quite frequently throughout the day. It's a convenience factor, but it's not a necessity when we're looking at saving $400 a radio, and we're buying 100 of them.
Other questions, Mike?
You went through and you tried to figure out how many of the analogs we don't really need going forward. How many do you think you eliminated during the process?
That's a really good question. Over the past year, we've been pretty free about when principals have requested an analog radio. We've had quite a bit extra on stock. in stock because the high school, all of theirs were turned over to us because they had to go completely digital when we opened. So if I were to guesstimate, I would say we reduced our count by at least 50, possibly upwards of 75, because we were actually, our guess when we were going into this was we were going to be looking to purchase around 150 to 200 radios instead of 102 that we came up with. And I'll say the principals were excellent in their meetings with us to identify radios that could be shared between positions. For example, morning and afternoon bus duty safety monitors are sharing with the lunch duty staff, or they're using the after-school bus duty are using the PE radios, because at the end of the day, the PE staff doesn't need their radios. So we were able to identify, and main offices, yes, the principal has one, the nurse has one, but the secretarial staff or the office staff, they have one. They don't need one sitting on everybody's desk, pretty much collecting desks throughout the day. So they were very cooperative in coming up with those numbers.
Getting back to Mr. Malat's point, the radios that I believe were approved in April of 2010.
Yes.
Those were the new radios for the high school, is that correct?
In April 2011, we actually purchased approximately 100 motor turbos that were for the high school, as well as the maintenance and ground staff, all principals, and one for each main office, and then for the education center staff that were identified. The high school had to have that because with all the brick and mortar out of that building, you can't, I mean, as some of you may know, you can barely get a cell signal, let alone a radio transmission through those walls. So we didn't have any option.
So there's not a cheaper alternative to those, looking specifically at the Dixon people?
To the ones we have at the high school, that alternative is what we're buying now for the rest of the staff. If we should deem it appropriate, we can replace some of those that are at the high school with this lower end radio and give the higher end radio to individuals that we feel need the option of the screens and with it. Because from a standpoint of coverage, it provides the same coverage and frequency issues or frequency that it does on the low end versus the high end radio. It's just the options that cost another $400 is really what it comes down to.
Other questions for Cam?
Just two real quick. One, I appreciate representation from the vendor coming out to the meeting. I think that's always a good sign of a company that's willing to back its product, answer questions as they come up. So thank you for coming out tonight. Two, just so I heard you right, there was a recommendation of 150 plus radios, and during the vetting process you realized 102 is really what we need.
We were just guesstimating at 150 going into this process. When we had met with each of the vendors, we told them it could be anywhere from 100 to 200 radios because we hadn't had those meetings with the principals. So they each gave us a quote based on 100, and then also it told us, and Matt, for example, came back and said if it's 125, the price may go down. And at that time of our meetings, we also weren't aware of what rebate programs were going to be offered through Motorola, because I believe it's quarter, new promotions are offered. And this promotion that was rolled out on September 10th, I believe, gives us $185 back on every 6 radios we purchase, which is why the number I'm asking for is 102, because we were able to get a little more rebated. We looked at buying 2 more.
Just to rephrase my question then, the amount of radios that were requested by district, you ended up reducing them through your meetings, or is the amount that was requested what's before us right now?
I would say we were pretty close to when we walked in the meetings, we really didn't change their numbers too dramatically from what the principals originally submitted. They were very reasonable going into this and had a good understanding of, we're not looking to give you radios that sit on somebody's desk for 6 out of the 8 hours a day. So I would say most of those meetings we walked out providing them actually the number of radios they requested. Sometimes we might have made some switches of who's getting them. Right. They may have asked for some for staff that after further discussion we identified those staff didn't necessarily need them, but other staff, for example, PE teachers who take classes out of the building and away from any type of any communication source did need them, and it hadn't been thought about in the process.
Just repeat again.
I did. You said that we had purchased 100 for DHS, correct?
No, for DHS, we actually, let me verify my numbers here, we were closer to 35 initially, and now they have 38.
Okay, I thought, around and you said that we had 100, so that's why I was like, this is there's a discrepancy between the report then.
No, the 100 that we purchased back in April of 2011 was 100 for the entire district.
Okay.
38 of those were assigned directly to the high school for all of their needs, and the rest were for maintenance and ground staff, staff at the
so
Ed
that's why you
Center.
have 97, and then 4 were transferred.
Correct, and those 4 actually came from the education center. We identified some departments that didn't necessarily, or positions that didn't need to have Mototoba radio on their desk. My office sits right in the middle. I will always have the spares on chargers, so should the need arise at the Ed Center, anyone can go into my office and grab a spare radio rather than designating a person or to have a radio sitting on their desk. So that's where those 4 came from. And we did go into it last year wanting one for every principal and one for every main office because they were the best quality communication piece of the time for crisis situations. And we were having issues with crisis situations, especially at our Cortland and Malta facilities because the repeaters were not transmitting the signals properly on an analog basis.
Actually, I have one more, if you don't mind.
I kind of mind. Go ahead.
Just to clarify in my mind, if I remember right, last time there was a proposal for, I mean, it was huge.
Yes.
We said go back to the drawing board, and a solution came up where we could reprogram some of the radios, and it ended up being a fraction of the cost to accomplish the need at the time.
Yes.
Okay. If that's the premise, how do we know the similar thing is not possible right now? Was that taken into consideration? Can I vote yes on this and know that we're not repeating what we could have done or what we did last time, but we could do it this time?
Sure.
How do I feel confident that that has happened, that due diligence has been done?
The programming that was done last year to make this work without spending another, at that time was proposed was another $100,000 on top of the initial purchase. That was done to all of the analog radios by Kevin through putting in additional repeaters, programming so that they talk, the analogs at certain buildings can talk to the digitals at those buildings, being the principal and the office staff, but can't talk to anyone else. Those analogs, they have to be recycled as of December 31st based on the FCC mandate. Our ICOM analog radios are not compatible with the mandate that's coming down on December 31st, so we don't have the option of continuing their use because of this FCC mandate.
Yes,
Go ahead, Jessica.
I know you mind.
I just want everyone to be able to sleep at night.
Yes.
So.
So, right. Well, not that we haven't been talking about the radios
I
for the
know.
last.
We'll
what,
get
3 years?
one
Yeah. What are we doing with all the old ones? Can we sell them? What can we do with those?
We can't sell them. They will be recycled. We will be turning them over to Dixon, Ottawa, who will be stripping all of the frequency and drilling a hole in them, as far as I've been told, to make sure that they can't get out and be used out in the public. Because if you remember there, with the FCC mandate, if those are keyed up, if the button is pushed after December 31st, there are fines upwards of $7,000 a day. They will track us for 3 days and then tell us we owe $21,000. And they're looking to use this money, the FCC, as a funding source for their department, is what has been shared with us. So they're actually just waiting to catch people like this. So we don't want to be that. And so we do plan to roll this out upon board approval if we're on schedule. So by December 1st, we are 100% over to digital, which gives us the month of December to search for all these analog radios that people have hidden under their desk and in their corners and throughout their buildings, because there are still out there. There are going to be some out there that
Maybe we should all carry a drill with us. We see when we
A
drill
hammer.
But Tammy, first I want to thank you and Kai for your work on this and coming up with a better alternative. My last question is this the last time we're going to see this as an agenda item for a while?
Well, you'll be seeing at the next meeting for official approval. Today is strictly informational. I'd love you guys to approve it today if you'd like. I'd rather not be talking about this.
But
again,
actually, I thought it was brought, it says action and information, so.
So moved.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Any additional discussion?
I just have one comment. Thanks, Tammy. This is the most important discussion we've heard on radio since we got here. So
By far.
thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Who seconded it?
Jessica, quickly. Could we have roll call, please?
Michael Lloyd,
Yes.
Jessica Lyons,
Yes.
Tom Mattia,
Yes.
Mike Burbick,
Yes.
Tracy Williams,
Yes.
Colin Barnes,
Yes.
Nina Fontana.
Yes.
Motion carries. And Tammy, nothing personal, you're always welcome to our board meetings, come speak.
All right, thank you. It's not about radios.
Just not about
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay, we're going to move into our new business part of the agenda. And as you know, on our, thank you, gentlemen, for coming out tonight. As you know, we have a discussion item, informational item, proposed land swap. And before I turn it over to Dr. Briscoe, I just would like to kind of walk through the process of how we got to this point. I believe it was in November of last year, in which, in ways in which we're trying to find the best use for our assets that we have, and how we can use those to potentially reduce future burden on the district, and to reduce some of our deficit. We did an appraisal not only on this facility here, but then we also did an appraisal on the land on Fairview. And after that point, knowing that the likelihood that we would ever do an expansion onto Huntley Middle School, and the fact that we already are potentially confined in our land around the high school, at some future point, whether it's 10, 15, or 20 years from now, there may be a need to do something, as it was with the old high school, because that was added on 2 or 3 times. So at that point, we asked Dr. Briscoe to engage in some discussions with a local developer, our neighbor, out by our new high school facility. And Dr. Briscoe tonight is going to talk about that. The material you can be reviewing, it's right behind you. So please kind of, it's a little bit awkward, but turn your chair, and Dr. Briscoe, it's over to you.
Thank you. The reason that we want to have you watch this is some of the visuals will really give you an idea of what we're actually talking about. I think we got a couple good shots that you'll have a good review. So, like Mr. Nikita said, we evaluated our assets. Yeah. The Board of Education back in April asked us to appraise not only this property, but the property we were sitting on over by Fairview. And the appraisal came in, and you can see that up there. I just put the Ed Center here was appraised at 1.4, and the property at Fairview was appraised at $15,000 per acre, which is exactly 41.6 acres. And in 2002, that same $625,000 was purchased for $1,457,000. And it's important, Carrie, you brought that point up, so I think it's important to remember that. So from there, the Board of Education made a logical request. Well, what can we do with our assets? You know, what's in the best interest long-term of the district? And we don't have cash on hand in terms of, we have the reserves, but that's being utilized by the FFAC to come up with how to do things with other facilities like Carrie brought up. So what we did, so what I want to give you a visual before I talk about when we approach Chodine development was the property we're actually talking about is right here is Huntley Middle School, the old high school. And so you have 4th Street in Fairview, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of diagram of the property that was purchased back in 2002, and this is the 41 acres, 41.46 acres. So this is the piece of property that we suggested we swap with Chodine development up at the new high school. And the rationale behind this originally was just that we feel in the long term, there were no long-term plans for this area, but in the long term we felt there could be a real value that I'll talk a little bit about at the new high school. So I'll show you the property. This is a pretty good view. One of our teachers took this, I think Isabel took this picture, and I was looking real hard for a picture that would really give you a good vantage point of how much property is actually out there. Roger, you sort of know because you live right there. But this is when the new high school is being developed. And the property we're discussing, swapping, is this area back in here, which would square off. This is Pride Drive here. And we would square this off up here, and it would come down all the way to Dresser. So the district would pick up this property. And you can see where all the development would take place then with Shodine Development. And Dave Patselt's here tonight, who represents Shodine, so he may comment as we get moving on. So I'll show you just a little bit, a better diagram of what that land might look like in terms of the acreage. This isn't a real good picture, that's why I wanted to show you the other one, but this is the school site right now. And so this would be, we would pick up 33.46 acres, and that land really extends out to here, but this was the best we could put together. But I wanted you to have another perspective of the property that we were looking at swapping. So I wanted everyone here tonight to have a real visual of what we were talking about. So with that said, the rationale for the land swap was simple to us. There was a need for additional property at DHS. We actually, in 2009, when we went towards annexation, we met with Shodine and tried to purchase more property. It just didn't work out at that time. And so we still feel we have the same need. We feel the land at DHS provides for future options for the school district. There's a lot of potential for expansion for educational programs, future growth in parking, busing, and again, the current location at DHS is landlocked, as you saw on the last slide. So that's the rationale. That you got land sitting over here, 41 acres, that there's really no future plans for. And I want you to remember something about Huntley Middle School. That right now we have about 800 students in there, and we housed about 1,700 high school kids in there. So there's a lot of space to grow depending on what we do with Huntley Middle School. There's a lot of parking, there's fields there, even without the 41 acres. So there's still room for a lot of growth in that school. So without having long plans over there, looking towards the future, 10 or 15 years, which I don't know if anyone can speculate here what's going to happen at the new high school, but I can tell you if you drive up there with already 1,800 students, I can't imagine with 2,500, someone's not going to find good use to property around the new high school if the land swap occurred. So, what had happened, we contacted Shodine, we contacted Dave, and we started sitting down to talk about the present agreement. I don't know if all of you are aware of it, but there was an agreement with Macon who owned that development up there, and they sold it to Shodine. And that agreement transferred to Shodine. So the district still had to continue that agreement. And the key components, we believe as a school district, that impact us in that agreement was that the school district owes $1 million, a little over $1 million in impact fee credit to Shodine. Now, that wasn't a bad deal. What that was the property was sold at $40,000 an acre where we build our new high school. So the district spent $25,000 in cash and $15,000 for impact fee credit. Instead of paying the $40,000 cash up front, the district paid $25,000 and a $15,000 credit. Hence, we owe the developer $1 million in credit, in impact fee credit. Also, in the agreement is starting in 2013, the school district owes 4% on that $1 million credit if nothing happens out there. Finally, in the agreement, when Shodine Development decides to build up by the new high school, we get recapture fees for the lights and the roads and the infrastructure that we put in that we would share. So we would actually get reimbursed $654,000 is what we believe it would be. And we did work with Dave to come up with that number. So those are really the big parts of the agreement. Now, here are some facts that this is really critical for the community to realize. Because I know this impact fee is a big issue. But there has been little or no construction in DeKalb County since 2008. If anyone in the room knows of any, I'd we really need to know, but there has been no development, which really translates into no EAV growth, and that is critical to the district. Everyone's seeing EAV sliding, tax rates going up, the district's still getting their money. That is not good. So that's really a critical point to remember in this process. The other thing we did is we needed to figure out a creative way, because working with Dave, the idea of any developer back in 07, 08, you were building homes left and right and impact fees weren't an issue. Now there aren't any developments going on, and impact fees makes it difficult for any developer to come in and say, oh sure, I'll pay this much money for every home. So we needed to come up with a creative way to put a trigger point in this process to protect the taxpayer, protect the school district. And we actually assessed how many student seats we have in the school district right now in this present grade configuration, and we estimate 1,200 seats are available from kindergarten through high school. And it's a pretty close estimate. So I want you to keep that in mind. So here, other fact, we're sitting on 41.6 acres. Again, I'm going to reiterate that point, with no long-term plan in the future. We know DHS is already landlocked, and there's no room for expansion. School district's not in a financial position to just spend cash on land. That's a fact. In 2013, we start paying 4% on $1 million, which is $40,000 annually. And we know the equalized assessed valuation is decreasing, which has a huge impact on our taxpayers and our tax base. These are all facts in probably any community, but these are our facts in the agreements we have. And I'll tell you, without EAV growing, or even attempting to grow it, it's going to have a serious impact on our district as we go. So these are facts. So with that in mind, we're working with Dave. And here's the tentative agreement we came up with. The board asked us to work with Dave Patzel and Shodine, and we did. And tonight I'm here because I feel like we came to a tentative type of key point agreement on how to proceed if the board would give us the permission to move forward into make it a legal document. And here's basically what it is. If we did this land swap, Shodine Development picks up the 41.6 acres over by Fairview. We would tell him that here's the deal. We have 1,200 seats in the district. Your trigger point, if you don't pay impact fees, your trigger point is 600 students. If 600 students in either the Fairview, if he decides to develop the Fairview or the Iron Gate, at 600 students, that's a trigger point, then we sit down and impact fees have to start. 600 students or 7 years. So that would be our part of the agreement. And then also the Shodine would be expected to comply to all the city DeKalb ordinances, of course, and agreements that we have between the school district and intergovernmental agreements. The school district, if this went through, would pick up the 33.46 acres at DHS. Now let's be exact on this. Andrea, help me out a little bit. We originally had how many acres?
75.
75. And when Shodine took over the development, we purchased
Another 4.3.
4.3 acres. And if you add the 33, that puts us at approximately 113 acres.
80.
No.
Oh,
With the 33
yes.
would put us at 113 acres with the opportunity to expand for either educational related programs and, if needed, facilities. We would not, Dave agreed that we would no longer have to pay the 4% on the $1 million if we did this land swap. And finally, when the development begins, we would get $654,000 within the agreement. We would work that out. So those are there's a little, there's a lot of little details, obviously, but the Board of Education asked us to sit down with Dave and Shodine and try to come to an agreement. And obviously, there's no denying the impact to getting this deal done was right here. But we feel as a district that it's very responsible to tie students, which is something you can measure, because I don't think anyone here can speculate on land or speculate how many houses you're going to build. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do that. But we know that if we get to 600 students, there's got to be some cash starting to flow into the district. So, is that it? I think that's it. So with that said, I want to thank Tracy Williams and Michael Lord and Andrea Gorla. They all worked with me and Dave, and I would like to provide them an opportunity to probably add anything I might have missed.
The only thing, Jim, and I think maybe it's just an oversight, but your second bullet point for what the school district receives, there's an 8-acre difference, and then we would be reimbursed $15,000 an acre for those 8 acres,
Right.
which was Carrie's point earlier.
Right.
So that would be another thing that would come towards the district.
And that was up there. But
It was up there. You just did not mention that in your discussion.
So, good. Thanks for bringing it up. But I don't know if Michael, Tracy, or Andrea have any additional comments. We worked pretty hard at this. I feel like this is very responsible on the district's part, and I feel like none of us here will know, but I believe in 15, 20 years, someone's going to think, thank God they did that. But that's Jim Briscoe's personal opinion. So I don't know if Tracy or Michael or Andrea have anything to say.
I think what I'd like to do is, if any of the other board members have questions for Dr. Briscoe or for Dave while he's here tonight, and now's a good opportunity to do that. This will also be presented again tomorrow night to our Finance Facilities Committee, that particular meeting. So I know there'll be more robust discussion at that. And Carrie, that's an interactive meeting, so you'll be able to express your opinions very freely at that. But are there questions here from any of our board members?
I know FFAC will be presented on this, but I remember the city having discussions or input on this as well. From my understanding is that regardless, this agreement is independent of them or no?
Dave, maybe can you address your plans of going to the city?
I don't know if I quite heard Ms. Hines. Did you ask the status of the city?
Yeah, like what is their input on it? Like, is this independent of them, or are they going to be brought in on this? Should they be brought in on it?
Yes, the city will need to be brought into the discussion. But what is key before that discussion actually takes place, there has to be an agreement between the two property owners, the school district and the developer.
Mm-hmm.
So once that agreement is solidified, we'll then jointly approach the city. And different items that need to have discussions with them is one, if you recall, the property, the 30 plus or minus acres that Dr. Briscoe has referred to, needs to be annexed and zoned with the city ordinances so that it can be used for school purposes. So that's an example of an item that needs to be discussed with the city. If we are going to acquire the Fairview property, we're not in the school business right now. It's the purpose for being used for parks and schools. We need to change the zoning on that property. So to answer your question, yes, the city will be brought in, but not until there's an agreement between the two property owners, Chauvin and the school district.
One last question, just to be clear. So if we have an agreement with each other, the city, it's not like they can the only thing they'd be doing is zoning. They wouldn't be able, say for instance, to not approve this. They don't have
There would be in the agreement that we would have between the two of us, there'd be what I'll refer to as a kick-out clause, that in the event that we have an agreement, but let's, as an example, not that the city would do this, let's say that the city does not want to annex or zone the 30 acres for school, the school district would have a kick-out clause that would say the deal is off because we can't obtain the zoning.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
sure.
Mike?
Dave, would there be any other, would you look to us to share any other responsibilities as far as road, traffic light? I guess my concern is it's great to grow the piece of property, but now us growing that property, will there be the roads and sewer lines, water, that kind of thing that we will have to, again, partner on, much like we partnered going into this project, or are we avoiding that with this agreement?
As part of this agreement, we have decided that where we drew the lines previously with the shared cost on the traffic signal roadway costs. We're leaving those as is, and we're not changing any of those elements of the agreement.
Okay, thank you.
I think Dr. Briscoe and I, just so the Park District wouldn't wake up and see this in the paper, as a courtesy, we did have a sit down with Cindy Capek, our executive director, to explain this. We have an intergovernmental agreement with them. They take care of the yard, the grass, and so forth over there, maintain that for the AOSO programs. Dr. Briscoe also met with the AOSO board on Friday just to inform them and reassured them that we would be a working partner with them to help accommodate their needs, and they seemed very receptive to that. And I think there also is an understanding that, you know, the school district, this has been part of our inventory of assets, and I think everyone will eventually, something like this was bound to occur and be recommended. So, but just for public record, we have had just information, FYI, to those two groups.
In the city also, I have kept Mark Bernanke informed of what we're working on. So the city, Park District, and AYSO understand what's happening.
Any other questions, discussion? Mike?
Just concern on the strip adjacent to the Chilton's property. It's a small strip that you can't see from the building. My concern is oversight of that parcel. How do we look over that when we can't even see it? It's so far from the building. I understand we think it could be useful someday, but I'm thinking of today, and how do we keep an eye on that corner, and or perhaps it turns into an intersection? I'm not sure.
I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, I just look at it and wonder, how do we...
What I would just ask is, if by nodding of heads, if we bring this back as an informational possible action item at the next meeting. I think a lot of that would depend on discussion that would occur with our FFAC group tomorrow night, and feedback that we get from that group. But for my information, I'd probably keep it on the agenda so people can discuss it and so forth as well. Jim?
I was thinking of the timeline here too. I suspect what will happen is, you know, obviously the community will be aware that you guys will get more feedback. But my hope was tonight is I would get approval to move forward towards a more formal agreement that you could all look at in advance. Not like I wouldn't bring it to you for formal action. I would ask your permission to work with Dave to get a more formal agreement that everyone here can get their arms around, take a look at. And then the timeline I would look at is you can continue discussion, but we have a board meeting on the 15th, which most likely probably we wouldn't be able to, you know, have our attorneys involved and all that. But then we have a board meeting in November that we could shoot for to actually approve an agreement if we're there. You know, there or at least the 1st of December. But to get to that, move towards that direction, I'm asking for your permission to work with Dave on a legal agreement with the things we shared tonight.
I would support that. So I think what you're recommending is bring back for a discussion next meeting and formal action if it's decided to do that in the November meeting. And I'm comfortable with Jim, though, developing a more formal agreement in the process.
Thank you.
I think we're there. Dave, do you want any comments?
No, nothing further.
Very good. Appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on to presentation. I know, Jessica, you were asking for this information earlier. Connie, you're going to talk a little bit about the new employee demographics. We're going forward with that. This is an information item. Maybe Michael.
Thank you.
Basically, I just wanted to give you an update on our hiring for the 2012-13 school year. And one of the reasons that we kind of broke down the information the way we did is to focus the HR department regarding our future hiring process. So the first thing that we looked at were, first of all, there were 89 new employees hired district-wide. That is brand new employees to the district. That does not include people who switched roles within the district, and we did have a lot of that happen through this school year. And of those 89, 67 were female and 22 were male. Then we broke it down by race, and we chose white, Hispanic, and black because those are the three largest races represented by our student population. So with our hiring, you can see that 79 of the people were white, 2 were Hispanic, and 8 were black. I did pull the data from last year as far as our staff and students were concerned. And last year on our school report card, 59% of the students were white, 13% black, and 21% Hispanic. Of our staff last year, 93% were white, 2% black, and 4% Hispanic. When I figured the percentages based on this year it was 89% white, 9% black, and 2% Hispanic. Next, we look at the buildings just to see where the majority of the hiring took place this school year. And you can see the majority of the hiring did take place at DHS. When you look at that as a whole, that is the largest staff that we have, followed then by Huntley, Portland, and Rosette, and Founders, which then are our next 4 largest buildings. So as far as a pattern, our people leaving unproportional, we did not seem to find one when we broke it down by building. Next, we did break it down by race because over 40 is a protected class for those of us who are in there. And 23 of the new hires were over 40, and then 66 were under. Then the last thing we looked at were actually positions that were hired this year. And you can see that the assistants had the highest number. So we kind of looked at that a little more to see why that was. And in the spring, there was a reduction in force of 32 people in that group. Ironically, 32 people were hired for that particular group this year. We did do a recall, and we did offer jobs back to all 32 that were let go. Some took the job back, some did not because they had gotten positions elsewhere. So the difference then, or the reason the number is the exact same, is because we ourselves as a district hired 6 of our instructional assistants from the previous school year as teachers this year. And then in addition, we have had some additional new FTE added to our assistant group based on IEP needs of students. Yes?
Connie, approximately how many assistants do we have district-wide?
Over 150.
Okay. I didn't mean to throw you off.
No, that's okay. That's what Jessica's here because she knows that. So, and then you can also look, the next highest then was our coaching staff. And that is a combination when I looked at not only head coaches but also assistant coaches. There seems to be some changing done there. And then it goes down to our teachers. And I found it interesting that elementary, high school, and middle was really close. We had 10 at the high school, 10 at the middle school, and 9 elementary wide. And then the other different areas. So that's basically it in a nutshell. However, looking at this data, what the HR department has talked about is where we need to focus our hiring process. And we've talked about the fact that if you look at our genders, we're pretty disproportionate with our males and females, as well as within our race. It's pretty disproportionate, and it does not match the demographics of our students. So we've talked a lot about, we see it as being a twofold process. The first is our recruiting process. We need to do a better job of recruiting minorities as well as males in the field, especially the teaching. You know, currently we advertise using the DeKalb County ROE. That's where we post all of our job openings. And so we need to explore other options to get out there to recruit people to apply to the district. Another aspect that we talked about is we really need to do a better job of selling not only DeKalb, the district, to minorities as well as to males that are in the education field, but as well as the community. What does the community have to offer in addition? After we look at that and come up with a plan, we'll come back and let you know what our goal is and how we're going to achieve that recruiting, but also do it within our limited budget. So. And then the next part of that would then be to look at our interview process and how we're actually doing our interviews and getting some more consistency maybe in the interview process. So.
Yeah, Connie and I talked a little bit about this, and you know, I know the district's thin on cash, but one of the things I think we're probably going to have to seriously look at doing is looking at minority colleges and possibly sending a team during the recruiting time. And when we say recruiting, we're recruiting people to come to interview for the position. And so the concept is we increase the candidates and balance the candidates that are coming in to interview, that we feel we can change and balance the trend to look more like our student population. So we may look at moving our resources around so we can send teams to minority campuses, teaching colleges, to see what we can do to attract them to come to DeKalb. And I think we just need to take that step.
Are there any questions?
Quick, yeah, Michael?
We're talking about recruiting people coming in and going to the college. You see that primarily affecting those 29 teachers. Did you
Right.
break it down, the same information for our teachers only as opposed to the entire staff?
Yes.
So
We didn't, but I can.
because I'd like to, you know, to me that's important because they're the ones, you know, that are teaching our kids and everybody's interacting with our students.
Right.
But that's the one I think that we're focused on a lot in the past.
And when we were talking about the recruitment, we were talking to the teaching staff.
Right.
Recruiting the teaching staff for it.
Could you email that out to us?
I can, yes, definitely.
Dina?
The only thing I was thinking is that looking at the disparity with the hires by gender, I'd be interested to know if you have the same type of disparity in the schools, those who are in teacher education. There are always many more women than men.
Right. You know, I can tell you just because I'm coming from the elementary setting, that when we looked previous years as elementary principals, the number of male teachers we had in elementary was very low. So that is definitely when we talk about recruiting. You know, unfortunately, it seems like men go into education, they want to do secondary, but definitely really hitting that recruitment. If you are elementary, you know, come to DeKalb. We've got wonderful things to offer, wonderful programs.
Jessica?
But we can break that down too.
Well, Connie, thank you so much for giving us the presentation. I really appreciate that. And like you asked my question, I just basically wanted to know what the numbers, are they included? Like, are you looking at all positions with that? My other question was, I'm sorry. Oh, the people coming back, you talked about the assistants, but were the teachers included in that new hire? Is that included in
No,
that?
any of the teachers that were, like, for example, the pre-K teachers, because of not knowing the grant, they were ripped last year and then brought back. They are not included.
They're not included
as a new hire. These are
Okay.
brand new people. We also had, like I said, at least 6 people moved from an assistant category into a teacher category. That did not move. We had a couple of assistants move into the custodial category. We did not include any of that data. These were just brand new people to our school district in any capacity. So, and in addition, you know, to the teaching thing, the other thing that we looked at for the race was kind of the coaching staff as well, as well as the gender. We have a really, you know, low number of female coaches within our secondary programs, as well as minorities.
So will we be seeing a strategic plan in the future?
That is our goal, yes, before the hiring procedure, you know, process starts and season happens, that is our plan.
Jim, this last year, multicultural committee asked to help with that. They talked about bringing in a value piece to there to basically look at diverse, you know, asking questions.
Right.
Because again, it wasn't so much about race, but it was that understanding of the student, meaning that you can be any race and be a great teacher, but do you have that cultural understanding and that value piece to it?
Right. We had a pretty long discussion, a couple of meetings about the types of questions that are asked our candidates and how to weight those questions. And
So there are a couple people who have that research-based background on that we can work with that are on our multicultural committee. So.
Thank you. Any other?
Thank you, Kai. Appreciate it. Supplemental education service contracts, information item. Dr. Mueller?
Very straightforward. This is our second year where we're required to offer supplemental educational services to our students at both Tyler Elementary and Jefferson Elementary. So there's an incredible bureaucratic process involved in this. And we're at the point now where we just got the contracts, the deadline for providers to send their contracts to us was yesterday at 5 p.m. So we're vetting through those right now, making sure that it's a standardized BAE contract, the same contracts that were approved last year.
Okay.
And so at the next board meeting, we'll have the actual list of providers that who adequately filled out their applications. And then once it's approved by the board, then we get the letters out to parents and providing them descriptions in both English and Spanish of the services each of these providers provide, and then the parents can select from there. Now, some of these, right now, we're looking at about 15 to 18 contracts that have come back in under the deadline. We started initially with over 90 some we had to solicit, so it's been a bit of a lengthy process, but we're getting down to where we should have, after the board approves the contracts next week, if that's action is taken, we can then move forward and get the letters out to parents about the services.
Michael?
Do you have the data from last year as to know how many students chose each one of these different supplemental
There was
providers?
only, last year we only had 6 that actually went through the process. This year, and of those 6, there's only 3 that actually were in the schools working with our kids, because some of the providers, if they didn't have enough numbers of students that selected them, they decided to turn away. Now, this year, what we're seeing is a trend where there's a lot more online providers. We've got companies from California that want to offer online services. So.
Yeah, I remember going through this process last year. Another question? Yes.
Yeah, to go with the same question except change the demographic group, you as providers, how many students do you know actually utilize the services?
Last year there were about 80 some students.
80 students. And this
they have to be in the 2 schools. Well, last year Little John was a 3rd school that was SES was offered to. This year it was not because of their status change. So I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
which schools this year?
Tyler and Jefferson. And these services are only afforded to students who are on a free or reduced price lunch.
Other questions for Dr. Mueller? We'll look forward to seeing that next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, the annual application for recognition. It's a procedural thing that we need to approve.
Right. We can't send them to the state without writing down when the board approved them. It's a formality.
So it's been recommended that action taken in the Board of Education approve the 2012-13 application for recognition of schools for each school in the district.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Jessica Lyons?
Yes.
Tom Mattia?
Yes.
Mike Burbick?
Yes.
Casey Williams?
Yes.
Paul Barnes?
Yes.
Montana? Yes. Michael Lord?
Yes.
Motion passes. I apologize before we go into agenda building. It was left off. I did not catch it. The committee reports. That's so. Sorry, I didn't catch it. But I'd like to open that up. If anyone has a report, I'll kick it off. Myself, Nina, Cohen. What is that? Last Thursday night. We attended the Kishwaukee Division of the Illinois School Boards. We hosted at our new high school. So, school small, we're Northern Illinois, that were there. Board members, some of their superintendents. The highlight of the evening for me was the presentation by our a cappella group and our jazz band. The meeting itself was rather dry.
Just a little.
But the food was good by Chartwell, our food service company, and but our students really shined, and we got some tremendous comments. First about our facilities. The new head of the school association was there, very, very impressed, very complimentary of the school and of our children who participated. And you would have, I know everyone can't always be there, but you would have been proud of how the students performed. And also our National Honor Society students were there to give tours to people that wanted those. They gave a lot of the tours before the finished even started, so it was pretty cool. Other reports that anyone has?
I attended, DEF is a great group this year. I mean, it's just amazing how motivated these people are. Really trying to raise the bar. So,
Education Foundation?
Yes, the DeKalb Education Foundation. I also attended the Tech Math class. I don't know if there's an official term for it or not, but where students at Huntley and Clinton Rosette actually attend a math class virtually that's being taught by an instructor at the high school. And it was fascinating to sit down and watch how that works and the dynamic. Some work to do there, classroom management, things like that. But I got to applaud the district administration and staff for really, let's take a step forward and let's figure out how to offer additional services to kids without having to get them in a bus, ship them off somewhere, which is additional cost, but I think more importantly, reduce time for the kids in the classroom. So I think that's fantastic. I let Paul borrow a different kind of camera that hopefully will be able to get the kids to see more of the room, engage with the instructor a little bit more, so we'll be curious to see how that evolves. So that was neat. And then I attended, I don't know what we're called, tech committee?
Technology Strategic Planning Committee.
There you go. Met with Doug, Brian, who else?
Denise Fleming.
Oh, Denise was there, yeah. Just talking about what technology looks like in the district going forward. We were just throwing out there, like, what do we want it to look like in 2016? And started having a conversation based off of that. And October 15th,
yes,
correct? 15 to 20 members of District 428, we're going to get together and I'm going to facilitate kind of a swap that we did as a board, but just get feedback from teachers, administration, across all aspects of the district, all grades, just to really get an idea of, one, what they'd like to see technology be for students in the classroom, but also I'm curious to see how we can utilize technology just from an operations standpoint. And looking at what we have, we've got a lot of the pieces in place. We just don't have a real formal strategy established on how we can, year by year, start making some serious progress towards that. So that'll be good.
Curriculum Council is coming up a week from Thursday, and Doug had sent me the agenda. And because we're all interested in our math program at the high school, they're going to be proposing 3 new courses that they'll be discussing at curriculum, and then hopefully if they're passed, they'll come to the board. But they're going to be proposing, let's see, Honors Algebra 2, Geometry AB, and an elementary, I'm sorry, that's a different one. Those two, they're just changing a name on another one. But, things are going into full gear right away with curriculum, with proposals coming up. Again, we have to remember that we want to get some feedback eventually, because otherwise we feel rushed, as we all did last year.
Yes.
Propose it so they can get it into the course book. So.
And that should be pretty much it. I mean, we were
That's it.
very vocal about getting those in from the various.
In timely manner.
Yes.
In that regard, does that come up to the curriculum committee as well, where you talk about flux period and recommendation on that?
There was going to be a report by Ms. Roebler at the November board meeting, I believe, okay, scheduled for both flex period and update on the literacy program.
Okay, very good.
Reminder, I know Carrie will be there for the rest of you, Facilities Finance Committee tomorrow night.
Actually, it's a working meeting, and I think that happens Thursday, and then the following Wednesday, the 10th, is a regular meeting.
Okay. Excuse me, so Thursday. I encourage everyone to be there, because it's a good discussion, and I think we're getting ready to pull the thing off the beer on a couple of things here. They've done a lot of work on, student numbers, consolidation facilities, true numbers of a lot of concepts we've been talking about. So I encourage anyone that can make it to make it.
And Andrea, maybe work with Dave to make sure we get good public awareness of the dates, so there's no confusion on that. That'd be really good. Okay, Dave. Thanks.
Mine was parade flags. We were there, the homecoming parade. Also, Jonathan was there last Wednesday. I wasn't able to go because of class, but I hear it was an amazing event having him there. Also, Saturday, lots of fun. The Bengals were actually, the DYFL Bengals was actually able to play at the high school, so it was amazing for the experience for the kids to be able to be there. And I stayed there all day, but it was a lot of fun, and they got to see everything. The troubles of having 4 kids, but but yes, they were all excited about being able to utilize the high school.
I apologize for doing this, but I think we have a little confusion about, I sent out a note to the board about changing our potential next meeting because it's the 25th. It's scheduled to be on the 16th. That is the 25th anniversary of the DeKalb County Economic Development Corporation, and some of us are pretty involved in that and need to attend that. 3 of us right here. And I believe, Michael, you could not make it on Monday, the 15th, is that correct? And Jessica, you can't make it?
Monday, we have class.
How about, so could we move it to Wednesday?
I think we formally approved the change to Monday. We agreed on a Monday, and so we formally approved it about a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but we could change it again. I mean, we could do that. I mean, as a board, if it's better to present
Are there things that we could delay it until possibly the Tuesday, the 23rd? Because that's a good night for you, Jessica, Michael, depending on how the girls are doing. Right. But I think we gotta set a meeting, because we have 2 people who can't make Mondays and Wednesdays. I guess I would entertain a motion to change it to our next school board meeting to be Tuesday, October 23rd.
So moved.
So moved. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry, Vicki.
Thank you.
The one other thing I'd just like to mention, speaking of DCEDC, I attended one of their meetings. A couple of the members there expressed frustration with having enough good employees that come out of high school trained in the areas of working like at manufacturing plant like Dryglock, was here in Seegers, and others expressed similar frustrations. And they talked about some programs to the east of us and so forth. So since I sit on that committee, I took it upon myself to introduce Gary Seegers, Paul Board, to Tamara up at the high school, and Dave Elliott, technology instructor up there, because Dave tells me the classes are full. But it just seems like the right hand's not talking to the left really well. So Tamara had to leave, but I think she might be bringing some things, which I don't think is going to cost us any money, but just talking about plans of action in which we can enhance this. Because I think one of the things we really want to do is make sure, our students are ready and capable to go to those, keep our students here at DeKalb, and as many as we can. So just wanted to pass that along, that might be something that comes out down the road. Any other items for agenda building? Mike?
Month-end attendance rates from all buildings would be great.
Okay. Jessica?
Chartwells, to know how that is doing, the feedback from students about, because we have the new vendor.
Actually, in November.
Okay.
Thank you. Algebra X, we could bring that back to the table. I know that things are being looked at, but if we can revisit that again.
Could we bring it through curriculum first, please?
Well, yes, if we can, the board ask that to be done for curriculum council to bring back Algebra X to discuss again. A lot of people, especially from what I hear at NIU, is getting around about the Algebra X, and there's some concerns about it.
Are you talking about the Algebra 1, Algebra AB?
Yes, or
Algebra AB, we don't
Yes.
have, yes.
to bring that back, because I know we have now geometry AB.
No, that's one of the proposals.
So that was why it came up, is because that was coming up. And then how does that look with Algebra A and B? How does that affect the students for college? How does those affect the students?
Yeah, I think, did you all get that, I sent out of all the presentations, we're scheduled to talk about Algebra AB in February, because we want to wait with the first semester grades, and look at the first semester grades between aggregate our algebra and Algebra A students versus what we had last year was only algebra. So far, it's looking very good. In fact, the first two exams, when we aggregated the test scores, last year we had a 73% average score. This year was 84% score, and the pass rate is doing significantly better. So I anticipate we're going to see a much higher overall pass rate, but we really want to wait till first semester to get some concrete data on that.
Is it possible we can have the Education Council look at that again, please?
Curriculum?
Yes,
Yeah.
curriculum.
Doug?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Nina, you sit on that committee? Okay.
Just
Go on.
I don't know if it pertains or if it's pertinent to agenda building, but I'd love to know more about what the ROE does for the district and what the costs are associated with the ROE. It seems like every time I turn around, either someone's commenting on it or it's in the paper, and I'd just like to have a better understanding of that organization.
Dr. Briscoe, will you report on that?
Yeah.
Very good. Give Jim some more jobs here?
I'm
Yeah, no, you're. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roger, Tim, thanks for coming. I think one of the next meetings, we'll have maybe some quick reports on how things are going in the schools and so forth. I really appreciate being here this evening. So, thank you.
There, you took that, Roger.
No. I said we have the two smallest middle school principals. Guys, they both came to walk in, I go, hi guys. Well, I think it's going to realize that
Last two big meetings have been, I've had
We're talking sound things he's doing, like and he's suspended the next school.